In today's red and blue political roundup, President Trump is threatening a government shutdown if his immigration policy plans aren't met. At a joint press conference Monday with Italy's prime minister, President Trump said he would have, quote, no problem doing a shutdown. The president is urging Congress to pass new border security and immigration measures. He did, however, add that there would be room for negotiations before the September funding deadline. This comes one day after the president tweeted another shutdown threat, urging Democrats to support his immigration initiatives. Ginger Gibson is a political correspondent for Reuters, and she joins me now from Washington. So, Ginger, in terms of actually shutting down the government, is President Trump, you think, really willing to go this far? And what would be the fallout if he did?
Republicans are dreading the possibility of shutting down the government potentially only weeks before the midterm elections. But it seemed President Trump is willing to make that threat. And he's banking on being able to win a messaging war, saying that it's Democrats' fault, that they're the reason he has to do this, and shifting the blame to them. But many Republicans in Washington are not optimistic that they would win that fight. And they're worried that should Trump actually try to go through with such a threat, that voters would respond unkindly in the November midterms.
I mean, what do we know about the effectiveness of this as a possible political strategy here, Ginger? Is there any way to tell right now?
It's difficult to tell, and frankly, it's really threatening the most strong response possible early in the negotiating process. There's still a long way to go before Congress arrives at their spending legislation. Most of them are gone now through the month of August and not to return until September, when they have a small window to get it done. But there are lots of other things that can be traded other than just the threat of shutting down the government. President Trump, however, likes to position himself publicly as a great negotiator, as someone who understands how to get what he wants. And we've seen this before, threatening sort of the most strong response possible to try to get small concessions. Although in this case, he may find that the thing he's threatening to do would carry more harm for his own party than for the party he's trying to attack.
We mentioned Republicans earlier. Several GOP lawmakers spoke out in response to the president's threat. On Face the Nation Sunday, Wisconsin Republican Senator Ron Johnson weighed in. Let's listen to that.
I think hopefully most of the appropriation bills will actually be passed, a little better prioritization of spending. So I certainly don't like playing shutdown politics.
And how damaging would that be for Republicans ahead of the November races?
I don't think it'd be helpful, so let's try and avoid it.
Well, we are less than 100 days from the midterm elections. Do we know how big an issue immigration will be with Republicans at the polls?
We know President Trump wants to make immigration an issue with Republicans at the polls. He thinks it's an issue that helped rouse his base in 2016, and he attributes that in part to his victory. And for that reason, he thinks it's a great idea to have Republicans talking about immigration in the lead up to Election Day, blaming Democrats. We see him tweeting about it so often, and that's because he thinks it's the kind of issue that he wins on. Democrats are also hopeful that it could help them at the election. They think that the issue of children being separated from their parents at the border was one that really upset their base, that helped them politically in the most crude of terms, because it made people unhappy with Donald Trump, reminded that they were unhappy with Donald Trump. And so this is, again, one of those issues where Democrats think they could turn back something that the president sees as a political advantage.
Well, Ginger, let's turn to the Russia investigation. Paul Manafort's trial starts Tuesday. It's the first stemming from the special counsel probe. In an interview Monday, the president's attorney, Rudy Giuliani, asserted that, quote, collusion is not a crime. Now, President Trump himself has tweeted that the Mueller probe is rigged. And I wonder what your thoughts are, Ginger, on whether or not there appears to be a broader strategic process here on the part of Rudy Giuliani and the president.
We are seeing Rudy Giuliani and the president try to systemically undermine the credibility of anyone that would criticize the president and of the Mueller investigation. They are trying to piece by piece take the whole thing apart and argue that everything that's happening is unfair. This assertion that collusion is not a crime is one that carries enough of a kernel of truth that it could be convincing, particularly to President Trump's base. He's right. Nowhere in the federal code does it say thou shalt not collude with a foreign government. But as folks like Comey have said before, there are other possible crimes involved in such coordination or collusion, and that someone who was trying to collude with a foreign government could probably be tried for conspiracy or accepting something of value from a foreign entity in a campaign, both of which are crimes. But by arguing that collusion itself is not a crime, the president and Giuliani are trying to really eat away at some of the credibility of their critics.
Right. Finally, Ginger, on Monday, President Trump said he would be willing to meet with Iranian President Rouhani. Now, this comes after tensions flared earlier this month between the two world leaders over the threat of war. What's been the reaction to this in Washington?
We know that, like the president's meeting with Kim Jong-un, the leader of North Korea, there are a number of Republicans who are concerned about such a meeting, particularly since President Trump has been so critical of Iran and the Iran deal. But this is something, again, that seems to have some silver linings for the president. He's positioning himself as willing to be reasonable, willing to be a diplomat. That's going to play well with his base. And he saw the North Korea summit as a win. He was viewed as brokering a deal, and he thinks that type of positioning and coverage really bolsters his view in the United States and in the world.
All right, Ginger Gibson. Thanks very much, Ginger.
Thank you.